Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the ultimate historical showdown. We're talking about two of history's absolute master strategists, the guys who completely decoded the ruthless reality of power. And what's wild is they didn't just study it, they literally wrote the cutthroat instruction manuals for it. So let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by looking at the chaos that forged these architects of power. Then we'll dive into the life of Chanakya, the empire builder, before jumping forward in time to check out Machiavelli, the exiled realist. Once we've got a handle on both of them, we're putting them head-to-head in a 10-category strategy battle. And finally, we'll deliver our final verdict. All right, part one, the architects of power. To really understand our first strategist, we've got to transport ourselves back to the volatile world that created him. The year was around 320 BCE. And India was totally fractured. We're talking kingdoms constantly at each other's throats. Alliances, they changed literally overnight. In this world, trust was incredibly expensive and betrayal was dangerously cheap. Surviving at all was rare. But right into the middle of this absolute chaos walks a man with no army, no throne, and no crown. Which brings us to Chanakya, the empire builder. And to really get Chanakya, you have to understand the defining moment of his life, which was actually a massive humiliation. Legend has it, Chanakya was brutally insulted in the court of the powerful Nanda king, humiliated right in front of the kingdom's nobles. But he didn't beg or back down. Instead, he walked right out of that palace and made an intense vow. I will not tie my hair again until this empire falls. Now, most men back then would just grab a sword to get revenge. But Chanakya, he chose a weapon that was far more dangerous: strategy. So for years, he searched for the perfect student to execute his plan. Eventually, he finds a young, completely destitute boy named Chandragupta. This kid had absolutely nothing. No kingdom, no wealth, zero powerful family connections. But Chanakya saw something everyone else completely missed: pure potential. He took this boy under his wing, trained him in warfare, diplomacy, economics, espionage, psychology, the whole shebang. And years later, together, they totally dismantled the Nanda Empire and built one of the largest empires ancient India had ever seen. You see, Chanakya didn't just teach a king how to wear a crown. He taught him how power actually worked. Spies, psychological warfare, national security. He wrote all these ideas down in the Arthashastra, a text so incredibly advanced that historians compare it to modern political science. But his core belief was this: power and strategy exist for one main reason: to protect and strengthen the state. For him, the strategy wasn't the endgame. The absolute stability of the kingdom was.
And that is a perfect pivot point for us, because while Chanakya was teaching a future emperor how to build a state from the ground up, our next strategist was doing the exact opposite. He was warning future rulers about how easily a state can collapse.
Let's jump into section 3, Machiavelli, the exiled realist. We're fast-forwarding nearly 1,800 years to an Italy that honestly looked a whole lot like Chanakya's fractured India. Italy at this time was just broken into these rival city-states, wars erupting constantly, foreign powers invading the second they smelled weakness. Now, Machiavelli worked deep inside this political machine. He watched governments rise and fall like waves, and he watched naive leaders doom entire kingdoms. And then his own luck went out. The government he served collapsed. He was arrested, imprisoned, tortured, and forgotten. Honestly, talk about a terrible week at the office. When he finally got out, he retreated to the countryside, far from power. And that's where he wrote his immortal book, The Prince. His message absolutely shocked the world. He essentially said, look, people are not always good, and politics is not always moral. He warned that any ruler who ignores that reality is going to lose their power. Some called him ruthless, some called him flat-out evil, but others realized he was probably the most honest political thinker who ever lived. I mean, his brutal honesty birthed a brand new term. Today, if someone calls you Machiavellian, they mean you're clever, manipulative, and strategic. But his actual practical lesson was super simple. A ruler has to understand human nature exactly as it is, not as he wishes it to be. Cold, hard reality over warm, fuzzy idealism. Okay, so we've met our two historical heavyweights. Now for the fun part, the ultimate strategy battle. Who was actually the greater strategist? Let's put them head-to-head across 10 distinct categories. Let's look at the scorecard. When we're talking statecraft, espionage, diplomacy, and economics, Chanakya absolutely sweeps the board. His systemic rules in the Arthashastra are practically unmatched. But Machiavelli strikes back, taking political strategy and human psychology, thanks to his deeply cynical but accurate read on human behavior. Chanakya completely dominates military strategy and nation building, though. I mean, the guy literally built an empire from scratch. Machiavelli grabs a point in practical influence since The Prince became the go-to playbook for European rulers. And as for legacy, we've got to call that a tie. Both men forever changed how we view power. Which brings us to the final verdict. It is time to officially crown the ultimate master of power. Looking at the final tally, it is overwhelmingly clear. Chanakya takes 7 categories. Machiavelli takes 2. And we have 1 tie. That is a truly dominant performance by the ancient Indian scholar. To really summarize why it shook out this way, look at the fundamental difference in what they achieved. Machiavelli definitely understood power. But Chanakya understood power, economics, warfare, diplomacy, intelligence, governance, and nation-building. Machiavelli taught rulers how to survive the storm. Chanakya taught them how to be the storm. One studied kings, the other created one out of an orphaned boy. And that is exactly why, in this historic comparison, there is only one definitive winner: Chanakya. His comprehensive grasp of literally every lever of statecraft makes him history's supreme strategist. But before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a fascinating thought. If Chanakya and Machiavelli had somehow met across the centuries, despite their vastly different goals, they probably would have agreed on one profound truth. People change, but human nature doesn't. And every ruler who forgets that lesson eventually loses everything. So, looking at the leaders of today, which of them are remembering human nature and which are forgetting it? Think about that. Thanks for joining me, and keep learning.